Hello. So today I am on my way home from my aunt's funeral. My aunt reposed recently. She had gotten brain cancer when she was pregnant with my cousin. I think it was the last of her 4 kids, and that was a long time ago. They're all grown up now, so she survived the brain cancer, but it took a toll on her, and the chemotherapy and everything, and it ended up causing her to get dementia toward the end. And she's not much older than I am, so I'm reminded on a regular basis that I'm a lot older than I think I am, so it's pretty humbling. But it couldn't have been a more beautiful day. It's November, and November's not always this nice. It's 62 degrees outside, but it seems like it's 70. It's a nice sunny day. So what can I talk about as far as hospice goes today? I should probably pick a sweet memory that coincides with my aunt. My aunt was like a saint. She was a very sweet, beautiful woman. One of the nicest people I've known in my entire life. So this hospice story is about a World War II veteran that I took care of. And he was probably one of the nicest hospice patients I ever took care of. He served in Guadal, Canal on a destroyer. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember him telling me about him shooting kamikazes as they were coming in trying to hit him. And he lived in a little small farm dwelling, and I visited him at home for about 2 years. And he had a very, very sweet disposition, very sweet, quiet man, very gentle. He had chickens that were about half wild. They roosted up in the trees. He didn't have a coop for them. They just kind of ran around his yard and roosted in the trees, and they would collect eggs from around the yard. His wife and his daughter quilted me a blanket. Now normally we aren't allowed to take gifts from patients, but in this particular case an exception was made because the family insisted. I took care of this man in hospice for 2 years. He had only 10% of his heart was working, and he wasn't expected to live that long. They did an experimental surgery on him where they took a laser and poked holes in his heart muscle so that it leaked blood all the time, and that somehow kept him alive. I don't really understand exactly how that worked, but somehow it worked. That's just a very crude description of what they did. But yeah, he was frail, and he was tall and thin, but he could still walk around a little bit, and he was on oxygen all the time. And he would tell me stories, and I would go in and visit with him and take his blood pressure and his vitals, and I would help give him a bath or a shower. We had it set up so that, shower and bathing is really a huge thing when you're on hospice, so you really need to put some thought into it. But we had it set up so that he could go in his bathroom, sit down on a bench, and I would shower him down and help wash him off. And I try to keep him warm. You always want to keep the atmosphere uncomfortably warm for you so that it's comfortably warm for your patients, because they don't produce enough heat in old age. That was a good tip for you. But yeah, they made me a beautiful king-size quilt, and actually made me two of them. They made me one for, it's like a lap blanket for the when I'm in the recliner, and then they made me one for my bed. And those are stored away safely so that they don't get torn up. I've used them several times, but I've got them in storage right now at my mom's house. So I guess the moral of that story is that just because you're put on hospice doesn't mean your life is going to be over in 6 months. It can last a lot longer than that. He's not the only one that I took care of for years. Another one I took care of for years, and this is the only reason I'm telling another story is because that one is so short. Even though I took care of him for 2 years, there's nothing I can really say about his situation except for that, you know, he was like family to me. Because most of the other stuff is just personal stuff, and I don't really want to talk about too much personal stuff with my patients. I can talk a little bit, but not too much. So I'll tell another one. This one was a lady who had Alzheimer's, and she was bedbound. She was in a vegetable state. She couldn't talk. The only communication she could do was with her eyes. And she was, stiff as a board. She was, sometimes when you age you get contracted and you can't move. And that's the way she was. At least she was straight. Her limbs were straight. A lot of people, when they get contracted, their limbs are flexed or bent, and that doesn't work very well, especially for giving bed baths and trying to stay comfortable. You can't reposition very well. Unfortunately, she had a really bad bed sore on her sacrum, on the base of her spine, and it was as deep as a softball. It was into the bone, and it was not easy to clean. She had one family member, but he was not around. But she had enough money that she was able to stay at home and have a live-in caregiver. And her live-in caregiver was a Mexican lady. And I'm not sure if she was a citizen or if she had a visa or what. I'm not really sure. But she lived in the house in a spare room. And this lady was another lady that I took care of for like over 2 years, or around 2 years. The biggest memory I have of her, there's a couple things. One is that I was taking care of her when the Twin Towers got hit on 9/11. And it was shortly after I got out of the military. And I was giving her a bed bath in her living room. That's where we kept her hospital bed. She was set up in the living room. And the TV was on in the background, which it often was. And then they interrupted it and showed the first tower had been hit by a plane, and they still didn't really know what was going on. But they knew it was really bad. When the second tower got hit, then I knew it was big deal. I knew that we were probably going to go to war that instant. Sure enough, that's what happened. Now, it'd be some time yet before I got called back into the military, the Department of Defense, to work as a firefighter again. But it did come like a year or two later. That was probably the biggest memory I have of that. I did go to the 9/11 memorial in New York when my father died. We went up there and saw the memorial, paid our respects. As a firefighter, I'm very skeptical about how that whole thing happened. I refuse to make a conclusive decision about it, but I'm just very skeptical about how the whole thing went down because of the structure of the buildings and how they fell, and what I know about steel weakening under heat and all that. Yeah, I really have my doubts about why that happened, how it happened. But I won't get into that. The other thing I remember about that is that she had that Mexican lady taking care of her, and she was an old lady herself. And one of the things I remember was she was a pot smoker. She smoked pot, and she wasn't the only one. A lot of my patients, their families smoked pot, smoked weed. But yeah, she smoked weed and lived there, and that was her life. She got free room and board, and then she would get paid for taking a certain stipend for taking care of this guy's mother. So she was kind of like she wasn't really what you call a maid servant, but that's basically what she was. And then I would come in and help take care of the lady in bed. As far as the bed sore that was like the size of a softball, I was working with an exceptional nurse, and she did a variety of really good treatments, and we did manage to keep it under control and to improve it a little bit, but we never could get it to heal completely. It was too far gone, and she did end up dying later. She was really long overdue anyway, because she was in pretty bad shape. She was basically a living skeleton, and I felt really sad for her. One of the sweetest things that her son did for her, though, and I really, really enjoyed, and I'm sure she appreciated it too, even though seemed like she was kind of out of it, was he hired a harpist, a professional harp player, to come in and play the harp as she was dying. For, I don't know, an hour or three, I don't know how long it was, but it was beautiful. This harp was as big as a person. It was a huge harp, classical, and this lady played beautiful music. It was really, really pretty. So that was very sweet of her son to do that for her. So it's very important when people are suffering to have that kind of care, to try to help take the edge off. So I know this is it seems like a very bland and not very interesting story, but I think it's still important. So I hope you think about that for your own death or someone you love. Pray for me, a sinner. God bless. Over and out.